Do you remember those forgotten American Christmas dishes we want back? They once filled homes with butter, spice, and family warmth. When did we let something so simple and good fade away? Holiday corn pudding soufflé was the kind of dish that could make a simple Christmas table feel special. It was warm, buttery, and soft as snow, a side that didn't try to impress, yet somehow always did. Families baked it in heavy Pyrex dishes that fogged up the oven glass while nutmeg filled the air. Cornmeal and milk made it hearty enough to stand on its own, while whipped eggs gave it lift. Some cooks would swirl in a little molasses or maple syrup, turning it golden and rich without wasting sugar. It was one of those recipes that made everyone stop talking for a moment at the first bite. The soufflé came out puffed and tender, like sunshine trapped in a dish. Leftovers never lasted long, often spooned cold from the fridge the next morning. Though it looks delicate, this was true comfort food, made to stretch what little you had and make it feel like plenty. You could always taste the care behind it, a reminder that joy didn't need a fancy name or expensive ingredients. It just needed warmth, patience, and the soft sweetness of corn kissed by Christmas light. Pork crown roast with apple stuffing was once the jewel of mid-century Christmas tables. The roast stood high and proud, the ribs curved like a crown, each bone tipped with a paper frill that children loved to tug off. It was the kind of centerpiece that made guests gasp, even if it came from a humble butcher. Inside, the hollow center held apple stuffing scented with sage, onion, and breadcrumbs, soaking up every drop of flavor from the roasting pan. The apples gave it sweetness, the pork gave it soul. Housewives spent the morning basting it with drippings, turning the oven glass into a window of pure anticipation. When it came out, glistening and golden, there was no question that the holiday had arrived. Before turkey took over American tables, this was the taste of celebration. It was tender, slightly smoky, and rich enough to make even a lean Christmas feel luxurious. Few families make it now, but in its day, it was the king of dinners, a meal that turned thrift into theater and hunger into pride. Buttered rutabaga mash was the forgotten cousin of mashed potatoes, served quietly beside roasts in cold Midwestern kitchens. It had an earthier sweetness, like a blend of turnip and honey, and a pale golden color that caught the candlelight. Housewives peeled and boiled the hard roots until tender, then whipped them with cream, salt, and a heavy hand of butter. Steam clouded the windows while the smell filled the whole house, mingling with the scent of pine and cinnamon. Children rarely asked for seconds, but grown-ups appreciated the comfort it brought. The rutabaga was cheap, filling, and lasted all winter in cellars or porches. It stood for resilience, a vegetable for people who didn't waste what the land offered. A dash of nutmeg or pepper could turn it festive without fancy ingredients. By the 1980s, it had nearly vanished from holiday tables, replaced by boxed mixes and instant sides. But once, it was a dish that carried warmth from field to plate, its simple flavor reminding families that hard times could still taste like home. Maple-glazed parsnips were a farmhouse favorite that balanced sweetness with earth and spice. The roots were sliced long, brushed with melted butter, and roasted until caramel brown. A drizzle of maple syrup at the end gave them a shine that belonged on postcards, not just dinner plates. They weren't glamorous, but they smelled like home, warm ovens, wooden spoons, and the faint crackle of pine logs in the fire. The syrup turned the parsnips tender and sticky, while a pinch of salt kept them honest. For families scraping through the late 1940s, it was a luxury they could afford, a sweet treat made from what grew in their own soil. Children might have wrinkled their noses at first, but one bite in, the buttery sweetness changed their minds. Served beside ham or roast beef, they brought brightness to heavy meals. Today, hardly anyone remembers them. Yet in their time, maple-glazed parsnips were a quiet kind of joy, proof that simplicity could taste like a holiday feast. Pickled watermelon rind was the secret sparkle on Southern Christmas tables. It was tangy, crisp, and glowing pale green in glass jars tucked at the back of the cupboard. Families started preparing it weeks in advance, soaking rinds in vinegar, sugar, and clove until they turned tender and bright. It was a thrifty way to use every part of the melon, but more than that, it added contrast to heavy meats and gravies. One bite, and you'd wake up your appetite all over again. The sweet-sour flavor cut through the richness of hams and roasts, giving each bite a new life. Some cooks added cinnamon sticks or ginger for a spiced perfume that lingered on the tongue. On the table, it was always served in small crystal dishes, glistening like candy. It tasted like care, the kind of small, thoughtful thing that turns survival into celebration. Today, it's mostly gone, but for generations, that jar of pickled rind was a symbol of ingenuity and homegrown love. Coconut layer cake with boiled icing was a tower of white perfection, the pride of every Southern baker. Tall and snowy, it gleamed like winter itself, a sweet miracle of flour, eggs, and patience. The boiled icing, whipped over a hot stove, turned glossy and light as air. Mothers spread it thick between soft coconut layers, pressing shaved flakes on the sides until the whole thing looked dusted in frost. It wasn't just dessert, it was a display of care, a showstopper that could make guests go quiet with awe. Each slice was soft, cool, and sweet enough to hush even noisy cousins. The cake symbolized abundance, especially for families who didn't often taste luxury. At Christmas, it sat proudly in the center of the table, waiting for the best china and the finest forks. It took hours to make, and that was the point. It was time turned into love. Even now, one bite would bring back the feeling of porch lights, hymns, and laughter wrapped in coconut snow. Sausage apple bread stuffing was the kind of dish that filled both the house and the heart. The mix of sweet apples, savory pork, and soft breadcrumbs made every bite taste like family. Cooked inside a roast or baked on its own, it soaked up every bit of flavor the meal could offer. The apples added brightness, the sausage warmth, and the herbs tied it all together. Housewives made it from whatever they had: stale bread, backyard apples, butcher scraps, and turned it into something rich enough for company. Children snuck bites before dinner, picking out the crisp sausage bits. When served, the stuffing was spooned out steaming and golden, perfuming the air with sage and butter. It was a recipe that felt generous, even when times weren't. Few things spoke home more than that aroma drifting through a kitchen on Christmas morning. It was the taste of abundance made from almost nothing, a reminder that care, not cost, made a meal special. Eggnog pie turned a Christmas drink into dessert magic. It was smooth, spiced, and rich without being heavy, chilled until the first bite melted like cream. Families used leftover eggnog from holiday parties, mixing it with gelatin and vanilla pudding powder to make it firm but delicate. A graham cracker crust gave it crunch, while whipped cream on top made it gleam under candlelight. For those who couldn't afford elaborate cakes or pies, this was a way to make something beautiful from what they already had. Each slice carried the cozy flavors of nutmeg, milk, and holiday laughter. You could taste Christmas in every spoonful, even if the tree was bare. It was one of those desserts that looked fancy without needing effort, a humble masterpiece of thrift and heart. Though few kitchens remember it now, eggnog pie once stood for the American spirit itself: creative, resourceful, and always finding sweetness in the scraps. Roasted chestnut dressing was a labor of love, a dish that made time feel like an ingredient. Chestnuts were scored, roasted, and peeled by hand, their nutty scent filling the house long before dinner. Mixed with bread cubes, onions, and butter, they created a stuffing that was smoky, tender, and just sweet enough. Before canned mixes took over, this was how you showed you cared, by roasting, chopping, and stirring until your hands ached. The chestnuts gave depth that no shortcut could match, turning ordinary bread into something memorable. Grandmothers passed their versions down carefully, always warning not to overtoast the nuts. Served alongside turkey or pork, it was the dish that tied the meal together. People didn't call it homemade back then. It simply was. Every bite carried warmth, work, and patience, the three things that defined Christmas in old American kitchens. Brown butter green beans with pecans were a quiet kind of elegance. Nothing fancy, just fresh beans simmered until tender, then tossed in browned butter that smelled nutty and rich. A handful of chopped pecans added crunch, turning a simple side into something worth remembering. The dish balanced delicacy with heartiness, the butter coating each bean like silk. It appeared on polished tables in the 1950s, alongside roasts and pies, but it never shouted for attention. It was the kind of food that let the meal breathe, giving contrast to heavier courses. Housewives favored it because it looked graceful and tasted effortless. The browned butter gave everything a warmth that no other fat could match. Today, we rush through sides, forgetting that the quiet dishes once carried as much soul as the main course. But back then, brown butter green beans were more than food. They were a reminder that grace lived in the small, simple things. Cranberry chiffon mold was the star of every mid-century Christmas table, light as a dream and pink as winter sunset. Housewives whipped gelatin into froth, folding in canned cranberry sauce until it shimmered like satin. Served in ring molds or cut glass bowls, it was as much decoration as dessert. The glossy surface caught candlelight and turned dinner into spectacle. It wobbled just enough to make children giggle and adults smile. Sweet but tart, it balanced the richness of roasts and gravy. You could taste the nostalgia of an era that loved color and cheer. It was the dessert of optimism, a reminder that something so simple could feel so elegant. No one rushed through it. Each spoonful was cool, creamy, and perfectly balanced between sugar and tang. Today, we might laugh at the idea of molded gelatin on fine china, but back then it was the height of holiday grace. It made people feel proud to serve beauty on a budget, a dish that shimmered brighter than anything money could buy. Saltine cracker candy, or Christmas crack as it became known, started as an accident that turned into a tradition. It began in small-town kitchens where thrift met genius. Housewives lined baking sheets with plain saltines, poured caramel over them, then smoothed melted chocolate on top. When cooled and broken into jagged pieces, it looked homemade and humble, yet tasted like luxury. It was crisp, buttery, and sweet enough to make anyone forget how little it cost. Children loved cracking it apart, waiting for that snap before sneaking a bite. Wrapped in wax paper, it became the go-to gift for neighbors, mailmen, and cousins who dropped by unannounced. Each piece tasted like butter and joy, made without fuss or formality. It showed what American creativity could do with pantry scraps and a little patience. That perfect mix of salty and sweet is what made it endure long after its humble beginnings. Potato candy with peanut butter swirl was proof that necessity could still taste like joy. Made from mashed potatoes and powdered sugar, it sounded odd until the first bite. Cooks would roll the sweet dough flat, spread peanut butter over it, and twist it into soft spirals that looked like candy shop treats. It was fudge without chocolate, a miracle without money. The candy didn't need baking or fancy tools, just time, care, and a steady hand. Mothers made it for children when sugar was scarce and store-bought candy too expensive. Wrapped in parchment, it looked humble but tasted indulgent. The mix of creamy peanut butter and sugary potato dough melted together perfectly, leaving a taste that lingered longer than most sweets. It was simple ingenuity at its finest, born from tight budgets and generous hearts. You could find it on countless Christmas tables across Appalachia and the Midwest, a symbol that even the simplest ingredients could create magic. Christmas plum pudding with hard sauce carried the echoes of old Europe into American homes. Dense and dark, it steamed for hours, filling kitchens with the smell of spice and molasses. Dried fruit and breadcrumbs bound together with eggs and brandy made it feel ancient, like something sacred. Families boiled theirs in cloth bags or tin molds, checking often to make sure it didn't scorch. When unmolded, it gleamed like polished mahogany. The hard sauce, rich with butter, sugar, and rum, was spooned on top, melting into golden rivers. No one ever rushed through plum pudding. It was the finale, the moment every fork waited for. Though its British roots faded, American cooks made it their own with corn syrup or apple cider instead of brandy. It tasted of patience and celebration, of a world that believed good things took time. In a time of shortcuts, it reminds us that some sweetness was meant to be earned. cheese ball with green peppers and pimentos was the party centerpiece of every 1960s Christmas. Round, glossy, and rolled in crushed nuts, it looked like edible decoration. Inside, cheddar mixed with cream cheese, peppers, and pimentos created a sharp, savory spread that went perfectly with crackers. Housewives shaped it carefully, sometimes topping it with parsley or paprika for color. It sat proudly next to the punch bowl, inviting guests to gather and talk. Everyone had a family recipe, often written in fading pencil on an index card. Served with Ritz crackers, it was the taste of comfort disguised as elegance. Each bite carried the tang of cheese and the warmth of memory. Before charcuterie boards and fancy spreads, the cheese ball ruled the table. It was friendly food, meant to be shared, not admired. Now forgotten, it once symbolized the joy of gathering without pretense, just laughter and good company. Holiday pineapple casserole was an odd marriage of sweet and savory that somehow worked perfectly. Layers of crushed pineapple, cheddar cheese, and buttery crackers baked into golden comfort that smelled like home. The cheese melted into the fruit, creating a tangy creaminess that coated every bite. It was the kind of recipe you'd hear about from a neighbor, scrawled on a church bulletin. The first spoonful made people pause, unsure, then smile as the flavors came together. It tasted like both dessert and side dish, warm and familiar. Families in the South especially loved it for its balance, rich but refreshing, humble yet festive. The buttery cracker topping added crunch to the softness underneath, turning simple ingredients into something indulgent. It wasn't just food, it was proof that flavor could come from the most unexpected pairings. The dish disappeared quietly over the years, but one bite could still bring Christmas back to life. Baked grapefruit with brown sugar was once the elegant breakfast of the 1940s holiday morning. Housewives halved the fruit, dusted it with sugar, and broiled it until it bubbled and caramelized. The sharp tang mellowed under the sweet crust, turning bitterness into beauty. Served in delicate glass bowls, it gleamed like sunrise. Guests admired its simplicity, while children squinted at its sour charm. It was refreshing, light, and far healthier than most Christmas spreads. For many families, it was tradition to start the day this way before opening gifts. You could almost taste the optimism of a post-war America that loved its rituals small but graceful. Over time, the grapefruit disappeared, replaced by boxed cereals and hurried mornings. But in its day, this dish was a quiet masterpiece of balance and restraint, a reminder that even the simplest fruit could feel like a gift. Spiced cranberry tea bread was a loaf that filled kitchens with warmth before it ever left the oven. Tart cranberries folded into batter heavy with cinnamon and clove gave every slice a taste of the season. Wrapped in foil and tied with ribbon, it became the perfect homemade gift. Neighbors swapped loaves as tokens of kindness, spreading sweetness door to door. Its crust baked golden, its center soft and fragrant, the kind of bread you sliced while still warm just to smell it better. It tasted like family, generosity, and the hum of December mornings. People baked it to show they cared, not to impress. It wasn't fancy, it was familiar, and that made it special. Each crumb told the story of a country that believed the best gifts came from its own ovens. Few things said "Merry Christmas" quite like a loaf shared in good faith. Ham loaf with pineapple glaze was one of those dishes that made thrift look indulgent. Made from ground ham and pork, it stretched a few scraps into something that could feed a family. Baked in a loaf pan, it caramelized under a glaze of brown sugar and pineapple juice that turned sticky and golden. The sweet fruit played against the salty meat, a perfect balance of contrasts. Families made it when a full roast was out of reach, but the holiday spirit still called for something special. The scent filled the house, both savory and sweet, a comfort all its own. Served with mashed potatoes or beans, it was hearty enough for celebration and humble enough for every day. Housewives loved it because it used what was on hand. No waste, just warmth. Though few people make it now, its legacy lingers in every meal that turns scraps into pride. Old-fashioned ribbon cookies were a baker's labor of love, striped with color and layered with patience. The dough was divided and dyed in festive shades, stacked, chilled, and sliced with precision. Every cookie came out looking like a miniature holiday gift, neat and bright. Baking them took hours, but that was part of their charm. The time was as sweet as the result. They were buttery, crisp, and touched with almond or vanilla, depending on the family recipe. Mothers would bake them in big batches, storing them in tins lined with wax paper to last through the holidays. Children watched in awe as the ribbons appeared when cut, like magic from dough. They weren't just cookies. They were a craft, a symbol of care and creativity. Few make them now, but once they were the pride of every cookie plate and the highlight of every Christmas party. Souffle pie was a slice of sweetness that once defined Pennsylvania Dutch Christmas mornings. Made from molasses, flour, and a crumbly topping, it was sticky in the center and crisp at the edge. Families baked it in cast-iron pans the night before, letting the smell drift through drafty farmhouses. The rich, dark syrup gave it depth, while the crumbs added a tender crunch that no bakery could match. It was hearty enough to eat for breakfast with hot coffee and light enough to serve for dessert. Some called it poor man's pie, but it tasted like a feast to anyone who grew up on it. The gooey layer in the middle, called the wet bottom, was the mark of a perfect bake. Grandmothers guarded their recipes like secrets, measuring molasses by feel, not by cup. Every slice carried the warmth of thrift and comfort, the kind that belonged to early risers and long winters. Today, you can still find it in small-town diners, but back then it was everywhere. Proof that sugar, flour, and care could turn simplicity into something sacred. Christmas chow chow relish was the colorful burst that brightened heavy holiday meals. It was tangy, crunchy, and packed with peppers, cabbage, onions, and vinegar. Everything chopped fine and steeped in sugar brine until the colors glowed. No Christmas ham or cornbread dinner was complete without a spoonful on the side. The relish cut through salt and fat like sunshine after snow. Families made big batches weeks ahead, boiling jars in hot water baths while the kitchen filled with steam and spice. Each jar gleamed like stained glass, lined up proudly on pantry shelves. It wasn't fancy, but it was festive, a way to stretch garden leftovers into something lasting. The taste was sharp but cheerful, a mix of sweet and sour that woke up every bite. Chow chow wasn't just a condiment, it was a symbol of resourcefulness, turning end-of-season produce into flavor that lasted all winter. Today, it's rarely seen outside the South, but one spoonful would bring back the clatter of jars and the scent of vinegar rising on a cold December afternoon. Baked custard cups with nutmeg dusting were the quiet comfort of Christmas Eve. Smooth, silky, and faintly sweet, they were served chilled in small glass dishes after church. Milk, eggs, and sugar, simple ingredients whisked together, became something soothing and familiar. The custard baked slowly in a pan of hot water until it trembled just right. A sprinkle of nutmeg on top filled the air with warmth and nostalgia. Families didn't need fancy desserts when they had this, just the creamy simplicity that felt like a reward for another year gone by. Children scraped the edges clean while parents lingered over coffee, savoring every spoonful. It was a dessert that whispered instead of shouted, one made for quiet moments and gentle company. You could taste the patience it required, the slow rhythm of stirring and waiting. Now replaced by store-bought puddings, it remains a symbol of tenderness, a dessert made not to impress but to comfort, the flavor of home and peace wrapped in porcelain. Lemon icebox cake brought a burst of sunshine to cold winter tables. It was cool, creamy, and layered with graham crackers softened by tangy lemon filling. No oven was needed, just time and a refrigerator to set it firm. Housewives loved it because it was effortless yet elegant, made with ingredients found in every pantry. The sweet tart flavor cut through the heaviness of roasts and gravy, refreshing everyone's palate. Served from pastel Pyrex dishes, it gleamed pale yellow under Christmas lights. It tasted like brightness in a season of gray, a promise of spring tucked between layers of cream. Children licked the beaters while mothers smoothed the top with the back of a spoon. Every bite was both light and rich, simple, yet full of love. Though forgotten now, lemon icebox cake once stood for cleverness and comfort, proof that even the coldest December could hold a little bit of sunshine. Homemade divinity candy floated like clouds on Christmas platters. Made from whipped egg whites, sugar syrup, and a touch of vanilla, it was soft, sweet, and almost weightless. Grandmothers made it only on dry winter days when the humidity wouldn't ruin its delicate texture. The process was part science, part art, pouring hot syrup in a steady stream while the mixer whirred, praying it set just right. Once dropped onto wax paper, the candy formed snowy peaks that looked like drifts of winter. Some folded in pecans, others left them pure and white. The taste was simple: sugar, air, and memory, but it melted like magic. Children waited for the first batch to cool, sneaking pieces when no one was looking. Divinity wasn't just candy, it was a test of patience, skill, and faith. Few make it now, but those who remember can still taste that fleeting sweetness, the kind that vanished as quickly as it was made. Country fried apples made Christmas mornings smell like heaven itself, the kind of scent that made every cold dawn feel alive. Thick slices of apple cooked down in butter, sugar, and cinnamon until soft, glazed, and golden, turning the skillet into a bubbling pool of caramel sweetness. Each piece shimmered as it softened, soaking in flavor until the edges browned just right. The sound of sizzling butter filled the room while children peeked over the counter, eyes wide as the fruit collapsed into syrup. It was a sight and smell no one forgot. Families spooned the apples over biscuits, pancakes, or pork, letting the warm sauce drip and mingle with everything on the plate. Some added nutmeg or a splash of cider. Others just kept it simple, knowing the magic was already there. No recipe cards were needed because everyone learned it by heart, passed down through memory and scent. Long before coffee shops and breakfast buffets, this was the truest comfort food, made from love, not luxury. It needed no garnish, no trick, just butter, fruit, and time. That was the beauty of it. 3 humble things creating one perfect moment of joy that made even the frost outside seem soft. Sweet corn oyster pie was a union of land and sea that belonged to Chesapeake Christmas tables. It came out of the oven bubbling, golden on top, the scent of butter and brine drifting through the house like a promise. Beneath the crisp crust lay oysters folded into creamed corn and thickened milk, a filling so rich it shimmered under the spoon. Housewives prepared it early, whisking the batter while children ran in from the cold, their cheeks pink from winter air. The pie baked slowly, its heart savory and sweet in equal measure. Each bite carried the memory of the coast, fishermen hauling oysters from the bay, farmers shucking corn by hand. Served beside ham and greens, it grounded celebration in the work of the land itself. The balance was delicate, but when done right, it was perfection. Soft, salty, and slightly sweet. Over time, canned soups replaced the old-fashioned roux, and the pie faded from memory. Yet those who remember know it as one of America's finest winter comforts, made with care and pride. It proved that good food doesn't need wealth, only heart, patience, and a good oven's warmth on a cold December day. Cider-baked country ham was the kind of meal that tested patience and rewarded it richly. The ham bathed for hours in apple cider, brown sugar, and cloves until every slice carried the scent of sweet smoke and fruit. Each careful basting darkened the glaze, turning its surface glossy and deep. The kitchen filled with warmth, steam rising from the oven like a slow hymn. On Christmas Day, families carved it beside collard greens, mashed potatoes, and cornbread, passing plates down the line with pride. The cider softened the salt and made the meat tender enough to fall apart beneath the knife. It was less a recipe than a ritual, one that brought generations to the same table. The act of brushing glaze over meat became a quiet expression of care, repeated until it felt sacred. Today, few take the time, but those who do still know that the slow roast transforms more than the ham. It turns hunger into peace, routine into memory, and food into gratitude. When the final slice cooled, The air still held its sweetness, lingering like an echo of family laughter long after the plates were cleared. Applesauce spice cake with raisins carried the gentle taste of kindness baked into every crumb. It was simple, tender, and comforting, born from cupboards rather than cookbooks. Applesauce replaced butter, raisins brought sweetness, and a handful of cinnamon made it smell like home. Baked in bundt pans or loaf tins, it filled the house with warmth that wrapped around everyone inside. The cake rose modestly but beautifully, soft golden brown with edges just crisp enough to crack. It didn't need frosting. It was proud in its simplicity, a dessert that asked nothing more than to be shared. Sliced thin for tea or thick for company, it tasted like winter afternoons and quiet gratitude. Housewives passed the recipe hand to hand, each adding her own small touch: nutmeg, cocoa, or cloves. It traveled well, too, wrapped in wax paper and sent to neighbors or tucked into lunchboxes after Christmas. The flavor lingered like memory, rich but never showy, a sweetness built from patience and care. Even now, its scent can bring back a room full of warmth, love, and second helpings that never needed asking for. Homemade vanilla marshmallows were little miracles of patience and sugar. They started as syrup and air, whipped together into soft white clouds that glistened under the kitchen light. Mothers stood by the stove, stirring hot syrup until it reached that perfect thread stage, a moment known only by instinct. The smell of vanilla filled the house as children hovered, sticky fingers ready. Once poured and set, the marshmallows were sliced into cubes and rolled in powdered sugar until they looked like tiny snowdrifts. Each one was soft to the touch, melting on the tongue like sweet winter air. They were wrapped in clear cellophane and tied with ribbon, given to teachers, neighbors, or cousins who stopped by with gifts of their own. No store-bought version could match their gentle chew or warm aroma. Making them was slow work, but it was love in its purest form. Quiet, steady, and sweet. Long after the last ribbon was untied, their memory lingered, soft as snowfall. They reminded everyone that handmade things, though fleeting, always carried more heart than anything bought in a box. Hominy casserole was golden comfort baked into a dish that smelled like warmth and community. Cooked hominy, soft kernels of corn, was mixed with melted cheese, milk, and butter, then spread into a casserole dish and topped with breadcrumbs for that perfect crunch. When it baked, the top browned beautifully, crisp around the edges, while the inside turned creamy and rich. The scent of butter and corn filled the kitchen, mingling with the smell of coffee, pies, and conversation. It was mild, mellow, and deeply Southern, made for church potlucks, family gatherings, and winter suppers where food meant togetherness. Every scoop held the taste of home, soft and satisfying, with the kind of richness that didn't need dressing up. In the 1950s, dishes like this were passed around on long folding tables under buzzing lights, each one proudly homemade. You could almost hear the laughter echoing off the linoleum floors as plates clinked and stories passed hands. Hominy casserole wasn't fancy, but it didn't have to be. It was food that fed both body and spirit, warm, generous, and impossible to forget. In the 2010s, and I'm sure a lot of you can remember this, standing rib roasts were the undisputed top dog. It seemed like a complete 180 too. It felt like the general stance went from, "We need keto, our kids need to eat more vegetables," back to as much McDonald's as a human stomach can possibly contain. Somewhere along the line, standing rib roasts became the ideal Christmas meal. It had already been a staple for so long in American culture, so it wasn't like people were doing anything that was very innovative or new, but the 2000s have been full of attempts at reviving old culture and bringing back dishes and cooking practices from the 20th century as much as they've been about exploring new frontiers. With rib roasts, there was this need for a return to classic comfort foods that people had grown up with. A lot of Americans also grew up on the things we were discussing previously, namely canned, processed food, and they had forgotten the simple joy of working with whole cuts of meat. Cream of wheat, on the other hand, is a pretty classic cereal that was made using wheat flour, but you had to grind this to hell and back for the dish to work. Hot cereals as a whole were a little bit more popular in the past than they are today, but lots of things have kept up, and that's why it's still a presence today. You have things like oatmeal hot cereal, which is pretty much people's go-to nowadays thanks to the massive health benefits. I mean, how many YouTubers do you really need to see with thumbnails and clickbait titles about how oatmeal solves every modern medical issue of the 21st century? Or how many Instagram reels from gym bros analyzing the nutritional value? Everyone knows how good it is, and cream of wheat doesn't have even half the same pull in that regard. It's good for getting your carbohydrates in, but that's pretty much it. Plus, the feeling of eating cream of wheat cereal is a little too close for comfort to porridge, which is a texture that you don't see anymore in modern dishes. Be very wary of what you see on the internet when you search for a Jefferson Davis pie. For some reason, a lot of traditional recipes out there have started leaving out literally everything that makes this pie special. See, a proper Jefferson Davis pie is an antique 1970s recipe for sure, but even in the earliest 19th century references in cookbooks, it is dried fruit pie. Jefferson Davis made with spices, dates, pecans, and raisins, very each thick custard filling. In different parts of the South, the concentrated bourbon syrup to go along with it also got popular, but the pie worked as it was too. People were a little hesitant to try a pie with spices. But as far as vintage recipes go, both in the field, this pie left no boxes unchecked. We are quite sad to see it go, really. The tasty meat pie isn't your average store-bought pie. We're talking about a savory masterpiece filled with delicious goodness. This used to be a classic at Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners back in the day before hash brown casseroles came to take the cake. But tasty meat pies had their own beauty. Imagine a flaky golden brown crust with a filling of seasoned ground meat, chopped vegetables like carrots and peas, and a rich, flavorful gravy. The origins of the meat pie have been traced back to the Neolithic period around 6000 BC. Yeah, even the Egyptians were a fan of this classic. It's perfect for a potluck, a family dinner, or even a cozy night in. The best part? Its portability. Just grab a slice and head out the door. It's the ultimate dinner on the go. Maple glazed acorn squash was the kind of side dish that made the kitchen smell like the season itself. The squash was halved, seeds scooped out, and baked until its flesh softened and deepened in color. Then came the glaze. A mix of butter and maple syrup brushed across the top until it shimmered. Back in the oven it went, roasting slowly until the edges caramelized and the centers turned silky. The aroma that filled the air was sweet and woodsy, a hint of maple mixing with the warmth of roasted squash. When pulled from the oven, it gleamed like amber under the light, soft but still holding its shape. Each bite blended savory and sweet, earthy and bright, like a conversation between autumn and winter. It was a dish that needed no decoration, its natural beauty already enough. Served beside roast turkey or ham, it brought balance and warmth to every plate. Maple glazed acorn squash was nature turned into art, simple, wholesome, and full of comfort, meant to be shared with love. Mincemeat pie with suet was the heart of Christmas for generations, the kind of dessert that smelled like comfort and memory. The filling was thick and dark, heavy with beef fat, raisins, apples, and cloves, all cooked slow until the sweetness turned deep and spiced. Every slice was a reminder that celebration meant richness, even when the world outside was cold and gray. It was a pie that took time, patience, and a steady hand. There was nothing quick about it. The suet made it soft but strong, holding together the fruits like a secret too good to share. Grandmothers passed down the recipe like a family treasure, handwritten and stained with years of use. When margarine and vegetable shortening took over, the old way began to fade, called outdated and too heavy. But those who remember it swear no modern dessert has ever come close to that aroma from the oven on Christmas Eve. Baked ham with pineapple glaze was pretty much the quintessential Christmas dinner experience. You couldn't pass a home in the 1930s without smelling the fragrance of this. It was just the thing to get, especially since Christmases during the 1930s were pretty gloomy thanks to the Great Depression. People did not have a lot to work with, and what they did have, they really needed to be smart about and save it. That meant that you could throw things like a roasted goose or a bisque out the window, because who has the money for cream? That's right, even basic things like milk, cream, and better seasonings were out of the reach of the common man. During the Depression, though, ham was a silver lining, and I don't think there's ever been a better example of one. It was affordable, it came cured and canned, and it could feed a large amount of people in one go. That not only made it ideal for regular use, it made it especially perfect for holidays. When else do you really need to feed a giant amount of people? It made people reconnect with their Christmas spirit because they didn't have to wake up and eat makeshift bread anymore. They could actually enjoy some familiar tastes and have a nice dining experience with their loved ones. Pineapples were just the same. While they never had much mainstream success before this, especially during these times, Americans eventually had to take a note out of Hawaii's book. The pineapple came canned, thanks to bigwig companies like Dole, and it was always marketed as a high-end fruit, but getting a raw pineapple was a lot of work. You needed to have the proper tools to cut it and prepare it. Not that this was really the hardest thing in the world, but it was more energy than the average person had back in the day. Thanks to the canned variants, we had pineapple rings, and thanks to items like Spam, people got more and more accustomed to the idea of a fusion between the sweet and the savory. Plus, pineapples might be divisive as far as tastes are considered, but nobody denies their value in presentation. These things can really make a dish look great, especially glazes. All in all, it worked amazingly well with baked ham, and it let people save a bit more of both since they were using a little of each. Unfortunately, American palates would really start to go towards things like avocado toasts and pastas, rice bowls and curries, things where pineapples just don't make sense. Plus, a lot of people felt like it was better to leave the Depression era cooking in the 1930s because they could finally afford to eat better later. Sometimes things just get old, and sometimes they just don't work. We've had our fair share of both, and scones with clotted cream and jam are a bit of a mix of the two. Now, US and UK cuisines don't generally tend to mix, even though we've had lots of crossovers in the past now. Scones with cream and jam, at least these ones that would use clotted cream, were the quintessential British snack. If your idea of John 32 from West Virginia is somebody in plaid or flannel getting real intimate with a hot dog, then your idea of Martin, 28 from Birmingham, is somebody in a blazer enjoying a scone. It's just what we associate with the people, you know? These scones were something that immigrants from the UK brought on over with them, and don't get me wrong, in their parts of the country where there would be large British-American presences, it definitely was something that got a lot of mileage. In other places, it just wasn't really that much of a hit, and clotted cream wasn't really something a lot of people had access to. Kind of a bummer when your core ingredient ends up being in short supply for the masses, but maybe this one staying a niche secret is a good thing. I'm not the biggest scone fan after all, but this is all about you, so how do you feel about this little treat? Cranberry pies were made with fresh cranberries that would be used in either purees or jam fillings, and were always typically featured in tart pies or alongside sugar fillings. Amping up the sweetness factor was what bakers were going for with the cranberry pie, and to sweet tooths all across the nation, the goal was definitely achieved. Even if that came at the cost of some of your favorite pairs of jeans not fitting anymore, the taste was just divine. It was worth it to splurge a bit, pig out, and devour a cranberry pie straight out the oven. A lot of bakeries specialized in this, and it was a moneymaker that drove this. To customers, if a place did not have a cranberry pie, it probably did not have anything else worth eating. Still, cranberry pies are not the litmus test they used to be, and nowadays they are a pretty old-fashioned pie that had their glory days long ago. Celery root mash was the quiet elegance of 1970s holiday dining, where French refinement met American practicality. The rough, knobby root, unassuming and pale, hid a tender heart beneath its coarse skin. Peeled, diced, and simmered until soft, it was mashed with butter, cream, and a touch of salt until it turned smooth and velvety. Its flavor was delicate, a balance between potatoes' richness and celery's brightness, earthy but faintly floral. The first spoonful melted on the tongue, light but satisfying, filling the air with buttery calm. It was served beside roasted duck or beef, bringing refinement without pretense. Magazine spreads of the time praised it as modern, chic, and continental, but beneath its polish lived the same comfort found in any farmhouse mash. Its color was pale ivory, its texture a dream. Every bite felt thoughtful, measured, complete. Celery root mash proved that even the humblest vegetables could become something extraordinary when treated with care. A quiet triumph of simplicity turned sublime. Although potato au gratin originated in 16th century Europe, its roots in the United States can be traced to French-American communities in North America. Gratin refers to a culinary technique where a dish is topped with a browned crust. This can be made using grated cheese or breadcrumbs, or even butter and eggs. In potato au gratin, most of the time people use grated cheese or breadcrumbs to add a crispier crunch to what is already a perfect combo of baked sliced potatoes, cream, and sometimes dates. Think of it as the ultimate version of baked mashed potatoes. Despite sounding fancy, it is actually one of the simplest dishes you can add to your holiday menu. As nice as it is, that was a trait that was absent from a lot of the food that you'd commonly associate with the 20th century. Take Johnny cakes, right? Pretty typical boomer dish that's been around for the better part of a century and has made more than a few hundred appearances at tables all over the nation. Yet, it's not here anymore, not at all. And the reason? It went away from mainstream diets because it was seen as old-fashioned. The trend and focus on cornmeal and corn in general dying out as people moved towards more vegetables like greens and sweet potatoes, and a lot more of a focus for wear-oriented baking, which is a step away from how cornmeal was used as a primary ingredient. The pancakes and breads of today are almost exclusively made with wheat. Then there's the whole public perception angle. This dish just isn't seen as luxurious or even endearingly rustic. It's most commonly associated with poor man's food, and that doesn't leave a good impression on people anymore, even though that couldn't be further from the truth. This thing had a lot of regional influence, and it served the people well, but the times haven't been kind to the recipe. Raspberry Bavarian cakes were the pearl of any feast, with all eyes firmly glued to the cake's shine and noses pointed towards its ethereal aroma. You know when something passes you by and suddenly you forget the time and the conversation you were having? Your head just gets locked onto whatever whiff of magic just passed you by. People would often describe their first up-close contact with raspberry Bavarian cakes that way. Beautiful, but even tastier. They had a fluffy and melty creme anglaise base that had been folded multiple times in whipped cream. Raspberry Bavarian cakes were in cookbooks and magazines all over the nation in the 70s, and they were a way to make a statement, or to have one wedding cake you would not forget. We are definitely jealous of those who got to try a slice when it was in its prime. Lamb might seem like a fancy restaurant thing these days, but back in the day, it was a total dinnertime MVP. Lamb stew was a fan favorite at dinner parties back in the day, and I get the hype. Imagine the combination of melt-in-your-mouth lamb and an assortment of colorful vegetables like carrots, potatoes, and peas simmered in a rich, flavorful broth just begging to be soaked with some crusty bread. This is a dish that's guaranteed to warm you up from the inside out on a chilly day. Not to mention, it's surprisingly easy to make. Perfect for those nights when you want a delicious meal without spending hours in the kitchen. Just maybe don't tell your grandma you added a sprinkle of your favorite hot sauce. Some traditions are best left untouched. Chestnut puree was quiet elegance spooned beside a roast, smooth as velvet and sweet with the memory of smoke. Chestnuts were roasted, peeled, and mashed with butter, cream, and sugar until the mixture turned golden and silken. The flavor was gentle yet complex, nutty, faintly caramel-like, touched with the taste of the fire. Served warm beside turkey or beef, it felt indulgent without needing to show off. In the early 1900s, it graced both grand dining rooms and humble kitchens, a symbol of refinement that still knew how to comfort. The texture mirrored mashed potatoes, but its taste carried winter's heart, soft, rich, and a little nostalgic. It paired beautifully with gravies and roasts, balancing their depth with quiet sweetness. Making it took time and patience, the kind only holidays allowed. Each spoonful felt like celebration itself, simple, elegant, and timeless. Chestnut puree was food for the soul, a forgotten treasure waiting to be remembered. Chestnut puree was quiet elegance spooned beside a roast, smooth as velvet and sweet with the memory of smoke. Chestnuts were roasted, peeled, and mashed with butter, cream, and sugar until the mixture turned golden and silken. The flavor was gentle yet complex, nutty, faintly caramel-like, touched with the taste of the fire. Served warm beside turkey or beef, it felt indulgent without needing to show off. In the early 1900s, it graced both grand dining rooms and humble kitchens, a symbol of refinement that still knew how to comfort. The texture mirrored mashed potatoes, but its taste carried winter's heart, soft, rich, and a little nostalgic. It paired beautifully with gravies and roasts, balancing their depth with quiet sweetness. Making it took time and patience, the kind only holidays allowed. Each spoonful felt like celebration itself, simple, elegant, and timeless. Chestnut puree was food for the soul, a forgotten treasure waiting to be remembered. Pumpkin bread is also a Christmas comfort meal that you can find just about anywhere, and it was all the rage during the 70s. Recipes were being published in issues of cooking magazines like Good Housekeeping, which was a pretty big deal then. Anyway, people knew exactly what to do with their winter pumpkin harvest as they preserved the best of the best for Christmas. Most people also seem to think that it originated in Native America or from the Pumpkin Bread Media Cookbook. Either way, let's go over the flavor profile of this delicious bread a bit. You can expect some earthy notes as you bite into what seems to be the perfect holiday snack to start your Christmas with, as well as buttery walnut flavors with a velvety texture. You know, we never really talk enough about the Scottish aspects of our country. Let's fix that with rumble thumps. And yes, that is exactly what it's actually called. This Scottish dish is a hallmark of their tradition, made with mashed potatoes mixed into a cabbage casserole that's been baked thoroughly with cheese and butter. It's rustic, it's right from the Scottish Highlands, and it's a great way to get rid of some leftover vegetables that are on the verge of spoiling, so naturally, it was definitely in a lot of people's options. Plus, there was this entire phase of the start of the second half of the 20th century, where Americans as a whole took after Christopher Columbus and decided to see what else the world had to offer. Only this time, instead of uncharted land, they weren't around looking for new recipes from countries and their cuisines. That's how we picked up rumbledy thumps, after all. It didn't help that America had vibrant immigrant communities from just about every culture in the world. The simple truth is that this dish tastes good, but it couldn't keep up with the times. It takes a lot of work, it's a little too heavy, and it's just not well known enough anymore. Fast food, takeouts, and Instagram-worthy food often ended up taking precedence over regional rustic dishes like this one, and they couldn't really keep up with the competition anymore. Over time, it only got less and less exposure, and people eventually ended up forgetting all about this little fragment of Scottish culture. Mock apple pies were maybe the top 5 foods to come out of the Great Depression era. Everything about this pie was meant to imitate the feeling, texture, and taste of a good old-fashioned apple pie, but without the costs of one. In the trenches of the Depression era, basic nutrition and fruits became a rarity, and people really only had so much to work with. What came out of those times were a bunch of copies of very beloved foods that Americans were able to afford just a year or two ago. Mock cuisine soon took over a lot of neighborhoods, and mock apple pies made their home in dozens of fridges. Instead of sliced apples, people used Ritz crackers, and the taste and appearance matched an apple pie almost entirely, especially as folks got better at capturing the essence of one, although of course it could not beat the original, and since people's wallets would start feeling better soon, it disappeared. Cornbread dressing with sage was love served hot, a taste of the South, timeless and sacred. Scalloped cabbage was the farmhouse miracle that turned thrift into comfort and simplicity into celebration. Heads of cabbage were sliced, boiled until soft, then layered into a buttered dish with milk, flour, and crumbs before being baked to perfection. The top browned into a crusty layer, while the inside turned creamy and delicate. The scent that rose from the oven was quiet but comforting, a promise of warmth on a cold day. Each bite blended sweetness, salt, and cream, the humble cabbage transformed into something rich and gentle. It was food born from care, made to stretch what little the pantry offered. Farmers' wives passed it down through generations, teaching that love was measured in time, not luxury. Served beside roast ham or potatoes, it filled the table with modest grace. Scalloped cabbage was the memory of hard winters and soft hearts, a dish that spoke softly but lingered long, reminding everyone that simple food can hold the deepest kind of beauty. Tom and Jerry Holiday Punch wasn't a cartoon. It was the drink that made Christmas evenings glow. Made from beaten eggs, sugar, brandy, and rum, it was warm, foamy, and rich enough to chase the chill from any snowstorm. Families would gather around the punch bowl as steam rose from the mugs, the scent of nutmeg hanging in the air. It wasn't a fancy cocktail, it was home comfort in liquid form. Every sip carried the cheer of togetherness and the kind of laughter that only came once a year. It took patience to make, stirring the eggs until they turned to silk, whisking the heat just right. One wrong move and it would curdle, so you had to care about it, like most things that truly mattered. As instant mixes and bottled drinks replaced homemade warmth, the Tom and Jerry slipped into memory. But for those who tasted it, the holidays have never felt quite as alive again. So, with meat becoming a bit heavier on the wallet and with tastes going towards things that were lighter on the stomach as well as your finances, roast beef became something of a mass favorite. The post-World War II boom in the economy did continue to the 1960s, and I know that when I say the costs of meat kept going up, that doesn't make too much sense since people should have been able to afford it, right? Well, without going too much into economics, it wasn't that much of a boost that people could afford it annually and regularly. Beef, on the other hand, was still well within the reach of most people's monthly budgets, and thanks to advances in refrigeration and the concept of a fridge becoming something that the public was trying to adapt on a wide scale, beef only became more and more popular. You could now make the same cuts of beef last a lot longer thanks to refrigeration. Also, farming practices were benefiting from new technology too, as transporting beef from cattle farms back to urban cities and hubs was easier than ever, meaning there was more to sell in the markets than ever before. All right, now that the boring stuff is out of the way, let's talk about the actual foodie bits. Roast beef had always been a big part of the West's diet and culinary identity, and no one's denying that. It was a centerpiece for all kinds of celebratory dishes, especially Christmas. Plus, it was also seen as a status symbol. You know how today if we see a family go out for crab every week, we know they're well off? Well, it's the same thing for roast beef in the 60s. If you ever wanted to make your family feel well-fed and taken care of, you'd go for roast beef during the holidays, no question. Plus, it was just built for family dining. You could feed everybody in the house guaranteed and still have leftovers the next day, and who's really going to say that's a bad deal? Plus, thanks to things settling down, most suburbs were in full swing with non-stop parties and celebrations, especially around Christmas. And as a host, it'd be criminal not to have some of the stuff up in the menu. Things like this made it more a status symbol than a recipe as it took on a life of its own. But if you really got down to it, people were coming for the taste, no matter how much they convinced themselves that it made them seem richer. Don't get me wrong, you definitely weren't hurting if you could afford to splurge on it, but even people that couldn't would save up for it because it just tasted that good. Unfortunately, by the 70s, another round of inflation hit the masses and made large cuts that became a lot more unreasonable as a holiday feast item. Then, health trends also started shifting towards leaner and greener eating, thanks to concerns around the rising rates of heart-related incidents in the youth and the general public. Also, by this point in time, Americans were really committing to exploring other cultures. This is something I've mentioned before too, but it really peaked around these 2 decades. As a result, it became a little uncommon to serve roasted beef. Pineapple pudding cakes were also just as easy to make, and the perfect thing to freshen you up on a hot summer day. If you did not feel like pulling out all the stops and making a pudding and cake from the start, you could always use packaged products. Pillsbury sugar cake mixes and instant pudding mixes achieved almost the same effect, really. It makes sense why this cake lasted a lot longer than others, because when a recipe is easy to make with grocery mart substitutes instead of proper ingredients, the crowds are going to love it. After all, it makes the dish really accessible to everybody. When people think of easy-to-buy and make cakes, they think of your typical chocolate cake. Pineapple pudding cakes, also yellow cakes, were mixed with pineapple juice and cream cheese vanilla fillings. Definitely one of the most revitalizing vintage cakes that we are sad to see gone. If these forgotten Christmas dishes stirred a memory or made you hungry for the past, share your favorite in the comments. Give this video a warm like and subscribe so we can keep bringing lost flavors back to the table together.